My name is Ann Silverberg. I'm the Vice President of the Clarksville Community Concert Association, and I welcome you tonight to the first of our virtual visits with our wonderful virtuosic artists, the WindSync, a virtuosic woodwind quintet that comes from all over the United States and one member from Canada. So we're very glad to have them with us tonight. And we actually, long ago, well over a year ago, one of the faculty members at Austin Peay suggested that we hire WindSync to come and play a wonderful concert for us. And they will be here to play a concert and do masterclass or two here in our following season. But this year, of course, because of the pandemic, we suspended the season and just moved all of our concerts to the next season. So this evening we have a virtual visit. The Clarksville Community Concert Association is now in its 69th season. We will turn 70 in the fall of 2021. We exist to present performances of high artistic merit to the citizens of Clarksville, Montgomery County, and our concerts are normally held on the campus of Austin Peay State University in the really acoustically excellent George and Sharon Mabry Concert Hall. Our first goal here is to welcome you to our virtual visit and also to have you listen to one of the performances that the WindSync has recorded. They recorded Gustav Holst, The Planets, the Jupiter movement, and we thought this would be a way to introduce you to a group of 5 musicians that sounds fantastic. So without further ado, I'm going to ask my colleague to turn on the video of WindSync performing Gustav Holst, The Planets. Thank you. Thank you so much. You sound wonderful. One question that I have is, tackling the Holst. It's a big piece. The original calls for so many instruments, and you make it sound so big, and there are 5 of you. Can you say a little bit about how that works for you? And of course, I'm sure no one can possibly fail to notice that you're all playing from memory, which is also a fantastic thing. Could you talk to us a little bit about that?
Well, listening back, I'm shocked that we played that from memory. It's been a little while, but I think Kara can probably tell you about making that work for 5 instruments.
Sure. What you heard it's kind of the beauty of attempting to adapt something for a quintet, and the difficulty, which is that we can't just play the woodwind parts, but we still want it to be true to the woodwind timbres that our composer had in mind. Luckily, in Jupiter, Holst did use a lot of really incredible, brilliant woodwind textures. So I pulled out some of those original, especially flute and clarinet parts. Ani always has to do the heavy lifting if we're going to try something orchestral as a quintet. As our only brass player, Ani on the French horn is going to be playing trombone solos, trumpet calls, and all of the wonderful cinematic French horn work that you hear in an orchestra. And she's tackling that all on her own. For that reason, you'll also hear the clarinet and the oboe, which can at least pierce through the texture, playing some of the more bright brass sounds as well. But then there's that whole other thing, which is like the 60 other people in an orchestra, the string players. And in that case, we just have to be really careful to make sure that we're covering only what's in the music and not trying to do too much work. Because no matter what you do, a piece for orchestra with just 5 players is going to be thick. And so that's where I'm getting to the challenge aspect of playing a big piece for a small group. Because the texture is really thick and we are covering parts outside of the ones that we grew up knowing, many of us have played the planets in an orchestra. We're having to do extra lifting on the balance. So making sure that we know, even ranking 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, who's the most important part, and who needs to get out of the way. Every part is still critical or it wouldn't show up in the arrangement. But without that really careful balance and a really strict attention to articulation and how we're going to phrase something, it's not going to take off. It's a really fun challenge, though.
Well, it sounds wonderful, and the ensemble, excuse me, the ensemble is just fantastic as well. So before I go further, I feel that I should at least make sure that our audience knows who you are. Garrett Hudson is the flute player. Emily Tsai plays oboe in WindSync. Ani Hochhalter plays French horn, and Carol Lamour plays bassoon in the group, and she's also created this arrangement of the Holst for them. This evening, Julian Hernandez will not be with us. He's the clarinet player, but he'll certainly be with us. We hope the concert here in Clarksville, we hope will come off in the fall, but it may end up coming off in the spring. We're still working through our details for the end of the pandemic and life back with live concerts again. I want to point out just 1 or 2 things to our audience, just to make sure you noticed. You may put questions for the quintet in the comments section of the YouTube link, so feel free to do that. And some of those questions will be put up on. We will be asking those questions of at least some of those questions of the quintet as our evening progresses. I also want to point out that Clarksville Community Concert Association is an all-volunteer group. Our main expense, of course, is artist fees. So with no concerts this season, that means that our artist fees are less. And so knowing that we have many community members in this crisis who are suffering from hunger, we have also added a link to our YouTube for Fuel, which is a local group that helps feed the school children and their families. So if you feel moved to donate to that, of course, it would be greatly appreciated, not only by good-hearted people, but also literally by young folks. Music feeds the soul, but we have to generally feed the body before we can manage to think about the soul. So if you feel moved to give, please do so. Thank you very much. Well, let's see what. Oh, but let me ask one other question. So knowing that Garrett comes from Canada, and let's see, two of you are currently in Texas. Ani is in San Francisco. Can you tell us how you found each other? What made you decide to come together as a quintet?
Sure, I'll take that one. I have been around from the group's inception. The group formed back in 2009 at Rice University. The initial members, it has changed a little bit. We'll probably talk about that, but the initial members were all pursuing music degrees at Rice University in Houston. And we formed this group kind of as part of the chamber music program in the music department, but we very quickly kind of branched off from the typical requirements of an ensemble in that program. And we sought kind of our own path, our own opportunities outside of the music program in the Houston community. So that included doing community concerts, doing a lot of education outreach activities in the area. And that kind of developed into us touring around to our kind of network of people that we were connected to around the country. So that's how the group formed. Eventually in 2012, we were able to win the Concert Artists Guild competition and get management, and they then started creating, really wonderful opportunities for the ensemble.
Great. So you've been together quite a while then. That's wonderful.
It's been quite a while, yes.
And it's also very encouraging to me as a faculty member to see that you formed while you were in your student days and took off from that experience and branched out from that. That's a wonderful, wonderful thing. Can you talk a little bit about how you managed, we're going to listen to a little bit of Hold Sacred, which is a brand new piece, just finished in 2020, but it was also, so it's created in pandemic times. Could you talk a little bit about creating the piece and how you arrived at how that works? And then we're going to listen to it as well in a minute.
How's your internet, Ani?
Oh, okay. Well, I'll take it because Ani has some internet issues sometimes. Yeah. So this, of course, like you said, is all composed and recorded and put together during this past year, during the pandemic. And so we have, like a lot of other chamber music ensembles, have explored multi-tracking. And so that is something that actually we did pretty early on by ourselves. Just recording ourselves in our living rooms the best we can, and then putting it together in video and audio. And for this one in particular, Hold Sacred, Akshay Avril-Tucker is the composer, and she's absolutely wonderful. She wrote this piece knowing that it was going to be multi-tracked, recorded like that. So she made it a specific point to keep the entire thing the same tempo. So that we wouldn't have too much trouble, with ensemble. It would sound like maybe we were playing all in the same room. So with that in mind, she really developed something really beautiful. And although the tempo is the same, the rhythmic, intermixing of all the different rhythms that we're doing is so beautiful, and it moves very, very well. And it wasn't too difficult to record, actually. She gave us a click track, and she gave us a drone so that, we can all play in tune.
Wow.
And yeah, because actually that's one thing I think a lot of people don't think about, is that especially for a wind quintet, all of our instruments have very different tendencies when it comes to intonation. So having that drone, she gave us like a bass clarinet drone, basically. And that really helped kind of center all of us when we're just recording on our own. So throughout the process, she would give us little snippets, and we would kind of play through the snippets and give her feedback. And then she eventually came up with this beautiful piece that you're about to see. And so we were also recording, video, and that was done one time when we were actually all in Houston together, but we had a projector where each of us was able to get our shadows videoed. And we had professional people put it together, the sound and the video, not just ourselves. And so I think what came out was actually pretty amazing. This is something that, pop rock bands do all the time. They multi-track all the time. It's not something that classical chamber musicians do generally because of the subtleties of the music. But I thought this turned out pretty well. So.
Well, I think so too. So if we can go to listening to Hold Sacred, that would be great. Thanks. Thank you so much. It's so interesting. I mean, to find out that, as you said, classical musicians beginning to use some of the things that have been so familiar in pop, but also you had to cope with this whole idea of you're going to be doing the visual part of it. And so I understand this was a piece that was a commission. So can you say a word about that, perhaps?
Yes, the piece was commissioned by WindSync, which means that we wanted this performance to happen, and we initiated the conversation with our composer, who we had met through friends in Texas. And it means that we kind of had a basic artistic idea as well about what we wanted. The last couple seasons, we've been thinking maybe we wanted to explore the idea of sacredness, or the sacred and profane, which is a long tradition in music history, of course. And so that's what we came to our composer with. But that's the beautiful aspect of collaboration, is that there's this back and forth, and she came back with, well, sacredness is really inspiring to me, especially in the context of Odissi, which is this form of Indian dance that I've been studying for years and years. And so then she was thinking specifically, about her experience in dance, and that came forth then in the visual part of the video.
Cool.
Yeah. And the video was premiered actually because of some commissioning support that we got, which we should mention, from the Society for the Performing Arts in Houston.
In Houston, great. Well, wonderful. Thank you so much. We have a couple questions from our audience that I want to be sure we ask, but I also wanted to point out there is a form, if I haven't done it already, there's a Google form link in our comment section and the YouTube link. If you fill that out, you will be eligible for prizes. And some of those prizes are recordings of WindSync, and wouldn't you like to have one of your own? So by all means, so fill out that little form and be eligible to get a prize. Let's see. So we have some questions from our audience members, and I want to be sure to get to at least some of these. And for me, for one, for sure, how about, can you talk to a little bit about this memorization process and how you go about memorizing your music and getting that ready for a performance as a group?
I think we probably could all answer this a little bit differently. There's certainly a personal process of memorizing your music, just by practicing on your own and doing it in sections and passages and so on and so forth. But once the five of us come together, it is a whole new experience of learning how to memorize every individual part that you're trying to fit into. So you're not just memorizing the flute part. In my case, I'm probably memorizing Emily's oboe part or Julian's clarinet part on certain levels. And a funny story about this is a couple years ago, Julian had to kind of last minute bow out of a few performances while we were touring. And Emily and I just ended up for those concerts filling in the clarinet lines, even though we had never had the music in front of us. We had certainly internalized them to a passable degree. I will not say it was perfect, but there's that level of memorization that is kind of achieved when you're doing it with the ensemble. Anybody else have a thought on this?
It's just miraculous to me. That's just miraculous.
Yeah. So like Garrett was saying, there is a lot of individual practice that goes on. Like, for example, some people in our group do it by memorizing the chordal progressions. Maybe the lower instruments definitely do it that way. Some people do it by rhythm. Our clarinetist does it by rhythm. I do it by listening. Like I'm a very aural person, so we make practice recordings for ourselves, like very slow with the metronome in sections, basically, and while we're reading music. And then I listen to those practice recordings. I play along with the practice recordings. We study the score. But when we do get together, we have sometimes we have rehearsal retreats where we actually for a week go out into somewhere, where we don't have distractions, and we rehearse, together 6 to 8 hours a day for a week. And this is usually in the summer where we're getting ready for a season where we're kind of putting together a new program or some new pieces. So we are hoping that we can do that this summer. We're crossing our fingers because we didn't get a chance to do that last summer. But, you know, it's very helpful to have that like kind of marathon at the beginning if you really want to memorize something, not just your part, but like Garrett was saying, everybody's parts.
Sounds really super intense. I mean, to be together like that for those kinds of practice sessions. But then you also do, we have a question from our audience about, well, and I'm sure you've heard this a million times, but it can't hurt. How often do you practice? Can you talk about practicing? Not, we just talked about rehearsing and getting ready for a season, but how about what it takes to maintain the level of virtuosity that each one of you has attained?
You mean on an individual level then?
Yeah, and also, you know, what it took to get you where you are and what it takes to hang on to being able to, you know, pick up a bassoon and play like that, you know, night after night.
It does take dedication and certainly daily effort. It's interesting when you join a touring ensemble like WindSync, how things maybe change for you in terms of like the flow of your life as compared to being in school. There are some days where the travel is just brutal and we're on a plane and then in a van the whole day. So we have to think about what are we getting out of that. Sometimes we're actually just listening to practice recordings in the van on the speaker of the van. And like, maybe that's all we get. But it's different for each of us. For Emily and me, reed making is another component. So, and it's not negotiable. So sometimes reed making is also a big part of our daily work in the way that our colleagues don't worry about as much. But for Ani on the French horn, who's still with us, thanks Ani, she has a really physical, she has a physical restraint, which is that she doesn't have reeds. Her lips are her reed. And so she has to be doing basically her French horn calisthenics every day. So Ani is the champ who's warming up in the hotel pool at 6 a.m. if that's what we need.
Or in our rental van in, you know, North Dakota in -40 temperatures.
Ooh, wow.
She'll make it work.
To make it work, yeah. Well, you know, I have heard that too, that I remember, you know, as a music ed major long ago about, you know, what it takes to be a brass player and that there's just a level that you have to maintain, like you say, the daily calisthenics of going through that is really, it's inspiring to hear about it and to know that that's something that is with you all the time. And of course, as a touring musicians, like you say, a whole different kind of life and not having to figure out how you're going to manage with so much less practice time than maybe you would ideally have.
I would say just also like in terms of how we got to this point, like where you're saying, and perhaps this question came from a student. Yeah, so you definitely want to use the time in school to focus in on practicing to really be dedicated because like we were saying, once you get into the professional world, you might not have the time to really build on the fundamentals. But also I would like to add too, when I was an undergrad, I was a double major. So I actually had very little time to practice, unfortunately, because I was a biology as well as a music major. Yeah, so it was quite difficult. But if you practice efficiently, like you're not distracted by your phone, you're not like in a place where people just, you know, can start talking to you and like distract you. I mean, you want to have friends, obviously, but like you really dedicate a time to really be like, okay, I'm going to do this to this, plan it out, and say exactly what you're going to work on. Even if you have little time, you can still learn a lot. It's all about that really efficient, focused practicing. And one thing that my teacher at Eastman used to tell us is that, you know, you want to practice a good number of hours, but if you're going beyond and it's not, you know, getting better, it's because of the lack of focus. So if you need to practice 5-6 hours a day on the oboe to like do the same thing that other people are doing, there must be something wrong with the focus of your practice. Because you don't want to over practice and hurt yourself either. So take that for what it's worth.
Well, that's great. Thank you so much. I guess one other question that how do you manage to communicate so well? And are you together as a group very often? I mean, in normal times, say without a pandemic, you talked about getting ready for a season and having an intense retreat kind of a situation. But it sounds to me like, of course, you must get along pretty well to be able to communicate as the way you do as musicians. But could you talk a little bit about, communication between you as a group and as an ensemble, and how you achieve that?
Take it away, Garrett.
Go ahead, Kara.
All right, I'll riff on this one. Communication is kind of the chamber music skill. So what a question. It feels kind of loaded because kind of the whole point of chamber music is that we have all the creative control and we don't have a conductor. And so it's going to be up to 5 people to democratically come to an interpretation of a piece and to pull it off, with precision. So communication is kind of what we're always working toward. I will say the memorization does help, not to highlight it too much because you don't have to memorize a piece to be a great chamber musician. But in our case, we end up using lots of visual cues because we do have the freedom to look at each other at any given moment. And it gets to a point where even like measure 56, beat 3, I know exactly what Garrett's ring finger looks like coming down. It becomes that, intimate of an understanding of what we're each up to. But also, your facial expression or the way that you gesture with your instrument, just as a conductor spends decades trying to figure out their baton technique, those things are communicating where we're going with a phrase. If I see Garrett like pull out his flute, I know that he's going to try to come out also with his sound, and that he's wanting to be more present to the audience, and it's no longer a smaller moment within the group. There are a bunch of examples of that. Luckily, at this point, this cast has been playing together for 5 seasons, so we're pretty aware of what each person does as their own personal musical style.
Just to add on what Kara just said, it's really fascinating that a lot of the musical decisions we do end up making aren't ones that we have sat, in a room around our music stand debating about and articulating necessarily. They're really what she mentioned. They're just physical suggestions that we all kind of naturally form as we continue to perform the piece more and more, and it just kind of marinates that way. So it's a beautiful process of not actually having to articulate words into making a musical decision. So that's just an organic way that we interpret music as an ensemble. Oh, you're muted. We can't hear you. Not yet.
That was silly. Sorry about that.
There we go.
Yeah. So you're being musicians as you learn to make music and you communicate musically. That's great. Let's see. I think we might have time for one more question, and then we'll listen to another one of your recordings. What are you also interested in that inspires your music? And I know you have a wonderful video that talks about how your personalities work with your instruments and things. And some of our audience members, I'm sure, will go to your homepage and take a look at that. But could you talk to us a little bit? What are your other interests other than music? And what inspires you?
My cats.
Did we hear one a few minutes ago? Was that it?
Oh,
that was Emily's cat.
Okay.
We actually we have 6 cats amongst the 5 of us.
Wow. Okay. So you're all cat. Well, that's really, that's a topic of conversation in of itself.
We have a few random commonalities. Like there seems to be a bit of an interest in like horror movies.
Mm-hmm.
and then some people who don't like horror movies and, get tricked.
I will say that Garrett and Julian, one of their things they do on tour is try to scare me, like pull scare pranks on me, because I do scare easily. I don't like horror movies.
Wow. But, obviously you've toured a lot and so you spent a lot of time together. So you get along and you know each other very well.
Sure, yeah. I guess one thing that inspires me is like being also, like I mentioned, a biology major earlier. I majored in ecology and evolutionary biology, so it really focused on like the environment and the world, like how the world works biologically. And so nature really does inspire me quite a lot. I often enjoy, and Ani too, I'm guessing too, because she's like the main runner in the group. Yeah, but like nature really speaks to me, and running, hiking, sorry, my cat is, but like, I just wanted to say like that, and also just knowing things about other subjects makes you a more well-rounded musician anyway. So.
Okay, cool, good. Well, it's we planned this to last around 45 minutes, so it's time for us to listen to Hoedown by Aaron Copeland.
Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to Stories in Sound. We are WindSync, and we are a wind quintet that is based right here in Houston, Texas. We call ourselves a wind quintet because we all use the wind, or the air that we exhale from our lungs, to play these 5 instruments. Just to experience that, let's try that together. Take a nice, relaxed, deep breath in, and blow it out. Yeah, that's how we play these instruments. And the quintet part is because there are 5 of us. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Now, we would like to introduce you to these crazy instruments you see with a good old-fashioned Texas hoedown. Instrument is the bassoon. Maybe you guys have heard of it before. Can you guys all actually say with me? Bassoon. Yeah, so the bassoon has that word bass in it, and it plays bass lines in WindSync. That means that it plays low notes. And here's a low note on the bassoon. Now that's a lot of fun, but that low sound is actually produced by something quite small and high sounding. This is called the reed, and this is what makes the sound. It sounds like this. If I add a reed to a bassoon and move my air about 8 feet, I can make those big low sounds of the bassoon. Here's what a melody sounds like.
All right, thank you, Kara. Well, hello everyone, my name is Garrett, and I'm sure a lot of you already know what my instrument is. For those of you who don't, this is the flute. Now, the flute is a very special instrument in the wind quintet, because unlike the instruments that you can hear playing behind me right now that are made almost entirely out of wood, the flute, as you can see, is made almost entirely out of metal. And for that reason, it's going to have a very unique, a very special, and a very high sound.
Good job, Garrett. Good evening, everybody. My name is Julian, and I play the clarinet. Fun fact about the clarinet, it is the only single-reeded instrument in the wind quintet family. What does that mean? Unlike the bassoon that we just learned about, I have a single reed. I put the reed on the mouthpiece. I use my air to blow against the reed vibrates, and then I create the sound that I want. Now, I chose the clarinet because not only can I do hoedown rundowns, I can play all kinds of music. For example, hey guys, shh. Thank you. All right, let's get back to the hoedown, shall we? And a 1, and a 2, and a go.
Hello, everyone. My name is Emily, and I play the oboe. Not elbow, oboe. Now, a lot of people think that the oboe looks a lot like Julian's clarinet, and you'd be right, except for the clarinet is a single-reeded instrument, and the oboe is a double-reeded instrument, just like the bassoon. But it's smaller. It's like the baby version of the bassoon, and so I have a smaller reed, and it sounds higher, like this. Now the oboe gets a lot of the cool melodies in the group, so I'll play a really cute one for you right now. All right, Emily. Well, good evening again. My name is Ani, and I'm kind of the oddball in WindSync because I play the only brass instrument. This is called the French horn. Can you all say French horn? That sounds great. And the French horn is the longest brass instrument. If I were to uncoil these tubes and slides and stretch them out, it would be taller than Garrett, standing on top of Emily, standing on top of Kara. Maybe not Julian, but it is 16 to 18 feet long, and I can play the loudest in WindSync.
Fantastic playing. And I mean, the way you were able to coordinate that, except for Julian, that you were able to keep that vamp going and then just fold in those solos, it's just fantastic. It's just such virtuosic playing. I mean, congratulations. It's just great to hear.
Thank you.
So much. Oh, and we do have a comment that said that the flute studio at Austin Peay is thrilled to know that you're cat people. I feel for all your cats, because you go on tour and you leave those poor cats with someone else probably, and it's rough on those cats. But anyway, I'm glad you have cats, especially right now when we all need a cat or a dog or something to keep us company. We've run to a little bit beyond what I thought we would, but I can't thank you enough for being with us tonight. And I thank every single member of our audience out there. Thank you so much for attending our very first virtual visit. The WindSync Woodwind Quintet will be with us in the 21-22 season. We had originally booked them for this year, but they will be with the Clarksville Community Concert Association in our coming season at George and Sharon Mabry Concert Hall. So please be looking for that announcement. Remind you of one thing too, please do fill in that Google form that you'll see in the comment section of the YouTube link, and you will be eligible for a prize of some kind, and those prizes do include WindSync recordings. Let's see, have I forgotten anything? I think someone will send me a chat if I have, but I think, and we also have to thank Annie Hochhalter, who is here as our French horn player, but her sound isn't working as well as we'd like. So she's been the silent member of the Woodwind Quintet, although you just heard her talk about the French horn a few minutes ago. So we have to thank her, and also Cara Lamore, Emily Tsai, and Garrett Hudson, the members of the wonderful Woodwind Quintet WindSync, with us tonight with the Clarksville Community Concert Association. Thank you so much. Good evening.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.